Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Dino. I'm a clinical social worker here at NYU Child Study Center. I've been working with children, adolescents, and families for 20 plus years. I see children clinically here and their parents. I also do training and consultation in trauma and traumatic stress. You can submit questions at any time today by typing them into the question panel, the question pane of the control panel on your computer. That's on the right side of your screen. And we'll be able to answer some questions at the end of the presentation. So the whole presentation will be about 25 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes at the end. So I'm really happy to be able to cyber meet with you today. And I appreciate that you're taking time out of your busy day to be here together in community to look at this really important topic. One thing to know is that even parenting a high needs child, a traumatized child, a child with disabilities might make you feel isolated and alone sometimes, but you're not alone. We had 275 people register for this webinar, and there are many more out there. So it's a good thing to remember that there's a lot of folks who are struggling and who have wisdom in this area. So talk to other people who you know might be in the same situation. Don't isolate yourself. So the purpose of this webinar today is to honor your role as caregivers and to address your needs for self-care. It's not an easy job to care for children who have experienced trauma, who have severe disabilities, who experience highly stressed circumstances, who may have physical or mental illness, who have learning or social challenges, or any other problematic situation. Oftentimes, our kids experience more than one of those categories at a time. These types of things can naturally cause caregivers to experience their own stress above and beyond what's expected to be happening in a parent, given the complexity of our world. There's so much we could talk about today, but given our limited time, I have chosen a few key areas that I hope you will find positively impactful in terms of validating your experience, adding to your knowledge bank, giving you some tools for your toolkit, skills that you can practice when the going gets tough, and easing some of your stress and some of your worry. Our foundational assumption today is that every person on this call and each of your children has strength to build on and has a well-earned resilience. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back and even grow after troubling times. I know that this resilience is easier to spot and experience, sometimes more than others. Know that evolution has put us together in such a way that we as humans move towards growth and healing, move towards resiliency, though it's not always on this nice, easy one direction path. When you find yourself in a stress loop of thinking about all the things that are wrong and could go wrong and what you could have done, I invite you to try the following practice. Pause. Take a deep breath, maybe 2 breaths, maybe 3 breaths, and consider what in your life, what in your child's life is going right. Now, this isn't simply substituting positive thoughts for negative thoughts, although that in and of itself is a useful technique. It's a way of training your nervous system to stay calm and to stay more settled in the face of stress. Now, Bessel van der Kolk, who is one of the main researchers and practitioners in traumatic stress, defines trauma as occurring when both internal and external resources are inadequate to cope with external threat. And I would go on to say that it's generally external threat, but it also could be rising internally, like from a serious life-threatening kind of illness. Internal resources are things like health, temperament, cognitive ability, capacity for forming and keeping good relationships, and resourcefulness. And external resources, something like family and social supports, community resources, safe communities, good schools, having enough money to take care of your needs, and being employed. In trauma, we're always considering the intersection between these two sets of resources. For someone who feels they're in a traumatizing situation, something has to have occurred or is occurring, right? Something has to have happened. This is what makes it different from many other types of mental health diagnoses or situations. Now, with other mental health diagnoses like depression or anxiety, oftentimes there are precipitating events that spur the symptoms. But with trauma, something always has to have happened. These events exhaust the natural coping strategies that we all develop in facing adverse experiences in our life. When trauma and stress strain our capacity to effectively call on these resources and our coping mechanisms, our evolutionary backup system of fight, flight, or freeze takes over. And it takes over without conscious choice. It just kicks in. It's our survival system. It's automatic and it's encoded in our brains and bodies. And when the threat is real, it's what we want to happen. Now, what is experienced as traumatic differs from person to person. So even if you have multiple kids who've experienced similar things, the way that each individual experiences an event is going to be unique, right? It's going to depend on the person's own history, their previous exposure to adverse experiences, all the biological variables. It also depends on the event itself. How close was the individual to the life-threatening event or the highly emotional event? Did it happen to someone that they truly care about and they witnessed it, which can also be almost worse for some children than having the experience happen to themselves? How long was the exposure? Was it an interpersonal situation or was it more like a natural disaster or a car accident? Interpersonal situations tend to have more lasting and complex effects. Now, what also is important is what happens after the event. The number one thing that helps children get through traumatizing experiences or highly stressful experiences is support from other people. And in fact, that's the number one thing that helps adults as well. Right? Now, another factor to consider is, things happen, events happen, but whether or not there's additional stressors that are ongoing and that may interfere with a person's capacity or ability to be able to deal to deal with, process, and recover from stress. Now, stress is normal, right? We need stress. Stress happens all the time, and it's necessary for us to be able to grow in resourcefulness, in knowledge, in competency, in physical strength, almost any category. If we didn't have stress, we'd all be couch potatoes. Okay? And for the parents and caregivers of highly stressed kids or kids with really high needs, especially when kids act in ways that hurt themselves or hurt other people, it's not so much these individual episodes of adverse acting out or adverse events. It's not even the occasional event. It's the cumulative nature of having to deal with ongoing events and what seems like the unpredictable nature of when the thing is going to happen. It takes hypervigilance, right? It might make us angry or feel depressed or helpless. All those things come together, right? That causes this buildup of stress. There's a sense that there's never enough space, there's never enough time to recover from one thing before you're dealing with the next. And as the stress builds, it also takes more time to recover from things that happen. And so the pattern and the cycle continues. Compounding the stress of managing situations and episodes comes other factors, such as the pain you might be feeling for your child, right? The hopelessness that you might be experiencing in that moment, right? And then, of course, there's the rest of your life, right? You're not just a caregiver for this vulnerable and tender child. You have a lot of things going on, right? All of these things together might make you be in a survival mode, So take a moment right now to acknowledge the complexity of your life and to let yourself know that you're doing everything you can, given the resources and the constraints of your life. And with all that you're doing, you're even here today to try to learn more and gain more skills. And for that, I bow to you. Now, when you have this ongoing level of stress and caring for somebody else, so you always feel like you're bracing for something to happen, this level of stress can be called compassion fatigue. Right? So compassion fatigue is the stress, strain, and weariness of caring for others who are suffering from a psychological problem or a medical illness, and the emotional and behavioral overlay that goes along with those things. Right? It's a normal, it's a natural potential experience that comes with the empathic engagement of traumatized or highly stressed persons and also the systems around them, right? Because you're not just dealing with your child, you're dealing with the siblings, you're dealing with partners, you're dealing with schools, you're dealing with friends. All these things come into play. So compassion fatigue, we think about it as we're expending a lot of energy when we're caring for our children. Well, if this energy is not replenished, right? If our energy that surrounds compassion is not replenished, right? We can start to get like our cup is empty, or just gets drained without being filled. When you don't renew, you become vulnerable to increasing levels of stress and burnout, which impacts your ability to be effective in your relationships at home and even in your relationships with your friends or your professional relationships. Compassion fatigue can happen even when trauma is not present. But if primary trauma, which is trauma that happens to the self, or vicarious trauma, which is trauma which you witness or that's happening in another person, when these things are going on, it increases your vulnerability towards compassion fatigue. Some things you might want to look out for that might clue you in to maybe you are experiencing compassion fatigue is that you have a lowered capacity to regulate emotions, which means you get angry and frustrated and sad much more easily. You have less access to your coping strategies, or the ones that usually are there for you may not work. There can be disruptions in your basic sense of identity, your worldview. Things aren't safe. People don't care about me, and spirituality, which I'm likening to where you get your meaning in life. Right? What really do you value? What do you hold most dear? That can become a little bit skewed. There might be an inability to embrace complexity, which is hard when you have a kid with high needs because your life is really complex. There can be destructive, self-soothing behaviors, so that, one glass of wine a night turns into 2, turns into 3, just by way of example. You might isolate yourself from relationships that you really do value, right? You feel like I just can't take in any more stimulation. There might be difficulty separating your identity, your self-identity, from others. Where does your special needs child end and you begin, and all of that? And these can bring on sorrow and numbing and a deep sense of loss. The loss for how we wished life would be when our child was born, or how the future that we wish for our child or for ourselves, those kinds of things. Now, any of this can happen once, can happen twice. Maybe you'll have a week where you're unable to embrace complexity. It's when you really see the patterns and that it's happening over a period of time. And if you take a pause and step back, you can see that it's negatively impacting several different areas of your life. That's when you're like, I need to take care of me. So Mary Jo Barrett talks about enacting balance by replenishing energy whenever there's an outlay of energy, right? Now, you've seen this image, I'm sure, and you've heard the phrase about putting the oxygen mask on yourself first before putting it on your child many, many times. It's become a ubiquitous symbol for the right and responsibility of caregivers to care for themselves in order to be care for others. And I would add that just by doing it for yourself is reason enough to do it. Self-care is very varied in the way that, you can take care of yourself, all the things that you do. They have the attributes of being self-nurturing, of providing some sort of escape from the pain or the difficulty that's in your life for prescribed periods of time, fostering connection with others, and even the connection with yourself, right? And by doing these things, there can be a transformation in the way you interact with your child, in your relationship with your child, in growth, in yourself as a person who's in the world, right? So maybe some of you are sitting there and saying, oh, great, Mary, this is terrific. Sounds really good, but come on, my life is really, really full. And how can I add self-care to all the other things that I'm doing, right? It's only going to feel like it's going to add stress, right? Well, here's the thing. You don't have to take it on all at once, right? Self-care, like any other skill, you can learn in a step-by-step kind of way. Ask yourself, what is doable given my current resources and constraints, right? Taking small steps can really add up, right? Now, you want to look at what are the things that you're doing in your life that already do serve you, that already do feed you, right? And if you are already doing things that you enjoy and help you to de-stress and get back to your centered self, well then great, keep doing it. That's wonderful. To those things that you do, I would like to suggest a small practice. I call it bookending. Bookend your activities with connecting with your breath and some sort of explicit affirming statement to yourself. For instance, let's say you bicycle. Before you bike, you might want to take a deep breath and say something to yourself like, I'm doing this activity for myself and for my enjoyment. It replenishes the energy I expend taking care of my child whom I love and others. It helps me to feel good and grounds me in the here and now. So you go for your wonderful bike ride, and when you come back, get off your bike, take a deep breath, and something to the effect of, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been able to do this activity. I recognize the replenishing energy it has on me. So you're building in a level of awareness that heretofore you may not have done. If you don't have chunks of time, the other thing you can do is take mini breaks during the day, right? As stress accumulates, so does the benefit of relaxing practices and self-nurturance. Things you can do are eat lunch, eat a healthy lunch, connect with coworkers a time or two during the day to share a story or to laugh. Close your door. Listen to a favorite song. Plan for how you are going to take care of yourself after work. Maybe it's just sitting in your car for 5 minutes before you go in the house, right? And just kind of settling in and get ready to go and meet the rest of your day. Think about things that you like, prize, and respect about your child, right? And things that you like, prize, and respect about yourself. And always breathe, 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 breathe. Right? So other skills that you can build are around affect management, which is a fancy way of saying managing your emotions, right? These can be self-soothing things. Now, trauma and stress live in our bodies, and they can inhabit and take over our five senses in ways that we may or may not recognize, right? So when you're thinking about adding mini breaks, think about adding them in the context of your five senses. So looking at a beautiful painting, deeply inhale a cup of coffee, keep a stress ball close by that you can squeeze, or keep a piece of fabric close by that you like the touch of it and run it through your fingers. Listen to beautiful music, put on your favorite comedian, and if you are going to grab that 4 o'clock cookie or piece of coffee cake, then really enjoy it. Really taste it, feel the food in your mouth, and have a mindful experience with it. Another thing, way to regulate emotion is to practice grounding skills, things that keep us in the here and now. For instance, if you're starting to feel like, which way am I supposed to turn next? If you can, take a moment, sit in a chair, put your attention on where your body is contacting the chair. Take in a deep breath, and as you exhale, allow yourself to settle into that chair and to feel support. Feel grounded. Feel the soles of your feet on the ground. Keep your eyes open. Right? These types of things aren't about relaxing and going off into a wonderful visualization. It's about being grounded in the here and now. And these types of exercises can also be good for your kid. If you Google grounding exercises, there are a lot of wonderful resources that come up on the web. Okay? So as you consider practicing these different types of things, make it a habit. Practice these types of mini break activities when you're feeling calm, when you're feeling good, on a regular basis, so that they're there for you when you need them, right? When the going gets tough. Consider therapy for any unresolved trauma or for whatever is bothering you. It's not uncommon for people who have had adverse experiences at the youngest ages to cycle through therapy at different points in their life when the going gets tough. Right? And you may want to even develop a written plan for creating a work-life balance, right? A self-care plan. And I offer you this resource from olgaphoenix.com. If you Google that in, this self-care wheel will come up. You can print it out. And in each of those domains along that pie, there's different activities or things that you might consider putting into your self-care plan. Or if you are doing any of those things, you can congratulate yourself like, hey, I'm already getting enough sleep, or I'm already looking at sources that inspire me. Wherever you can recognize success in yourself and your child, don't let that opportunity go by. Okay? And it takes a village. It really takes a village to raise a high needs child, right? Make sure that you know who's in your support network. You might even want to keep a list on the refrigerator of who and how to contact. And you're going to have different people there helping you under different circumstances. There's going to be maybe a few people who are those people you go out and have fun with. There may be a few people are the ones who you call, you know that they're going to be there for you when you need to vent. There may be then those people who come to your aid when there's a really high level of stress, but it's below that level of an emergency, but someone to really help bring you back down and ground you. And then there are going to be those people who you really need them when there's a real emergency or a real crisis, right? These are people in your natural support networks, and they may also be people in your professional network. I mean, those professionals that are surrounding your child and your family, like therapists, like case managers, like doctors, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? And know that there's hope, right? That, again, there is a lot of resource, there is good in the world. Sometimes it's just about remembering and availing ourselves to the help that's there. When we're good caregivers and real capable people, it's not always easy to ask for help. So for some of us, that might be the very first skill that you might need to develop, is asking for help and knowing that it's okay. So thank you so much. We are going to have a few questions, and here they are right here. And thank you for your questions, by the way. How long does it take for a child to heal from trauma? Well, this is really a highly individual situation. As we talked about earlier in the presentation, it depends on the child's biology, their temperament, all the factors that have surrounded the child. Some kids really bounce back right away, right? Some kids, even in spite of having maybe multiple exposures to trauma or ongoing medical issues, can maintain a pretty positive take on life. Other children don't, right? So it's knowing your child, right, and accepting him or her for for who they are, and thinking about, are there other resources that might be helpful to my child and to me and to the rest of our family. Right. Another question is how to deal with resenting a spouse who has thrown up their hands or blame the child for these challenges. And that is a really, really common experience for partners who are caring for a high-stress child. The first thing that you can do is validate their feeling. Right? Of course they're frustrated. Of course they're angry. You might even be able to reflect back that, you might be feeling helpless and hopeless, and to encourage your partner towards self-care. Right? Maybe have them listen to this webinar, which will be up on YouTube shortly. Get other resources that are online. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network, or the nctsn.org, is a wonderful website for all kinds of psychoeducation and tips materials for caregivers and teachers and all kinds of professionals. Look for those types of things. Ask your spouse to schedule time for them to have their own self-care, or you can barter. Okay, you take this time for your self-care on Saturday, and I'm going to take this time for self-care on Sunday. And try to be able to touch into your sense of humor. Right? Humor can really help go a long way. Question 3. I have a son with stage 4 cancer. He's been battling it for 5 years. The trauma and stress on his younger sibling is debilitating. What can I do? And it's true that siblings, the non-squeaky wheel, as it were, often do feel left out. Their needs can be not met, not because the caregivers are unwilling or unwanting to do that. It's just that so much attention is drawn towards your child who's the high-need child. This can be another area where you really tap into your support network. Family, friends, community services. The other piece is that maybe the sibling of your child really doesn't understand, of your high needs child doesn't fully understand what's going on with the sibling. Maybe with well intentions you've been trying to keep him or her for some of the worst details. You may need to find out what the child is thinking about what's going on with the sibling, and give a little bit more information, or to offer the child information in a developmentally appropriate way. Also, it would be great for you to be able to go off and have a whole day with the sibling and to really make them feel one-on-one special. But again, step by step, small chunks, if you can give the sibling between you and your partner, if you are partnered, a consistent time every day, maybe before bedtime, or some time where they're getting 10 minutes of your full attention, that can go a really long way, right? Again, the consistency, and as the sibling grows and develops, you can grow along and develop those 5-10 minute interactions with them in a way that feels good for them and a way that feels good for you. And lastly, question 4, can therapies like applied behavioral analysis be traumatic for children? At what age would you encourage children to have therapy? Well, applied behavior analysis, from what I know about it, can really help children, right? It can help give them skills and structure and emotional management techniques that they may not have gotten before. What really matters is how attuned is the person who's doing the training and providing the applied behavioral analysis to the child, right? So there's fundamental things that happen with applied behavioral analysis, but then they need to be tweaked based on the needs of the child or the circumstances that the youth and the family may be undergoing. So you really want to make sure that attunement is happening. If you're thinking that this particular intervention or other interventions are not helpful to your child or perhaps are hurting your child, make sure that you talk to the provider and really talk it through and ask questions and get the information that you need. Sometimes when we're so exhausted from caring for our children, we kind of don't think about doing that, but honor yourself in getting all the education that you need in order to make the best decisions. And then at what age should you encourage children to have therapy? It really depends, and a lot of it depends on the expertise of the therapist. If it's for a very young child, make sure that therapist has that level of expertise, right? If you go to the NCTSN website, they provide some questions that you can ask a provider to make sure that he or she can give your child the level of therapy and the kind of therapy that's going to be most meaningful. So that brings us to the end of our time. On behalf of the Child Study Center, thank you so much for joining me today. Once you leave the webinar, you will receive a survey, and we'd appreciate it if you could please complete it. You will also receive a follow-up email within a day or two with a link to a recording of today's presentation. We hope that you can join us for our next webinar, The Acrobatic Parent, Juggling Family and Work on a Tightrope. That would dovetail very nicely with this presentation today. And the presenter will be Justin Missurel, PhD. That presentation is happening on Tuesday, May 8th at 1 o'clock. So again, on behalf of the Child Study Center, thank you so much. Good luck and goodbye.